Hey everyone, Adam here, So Was Your Podcast. I have another interview for you today. I got to sit down with James Suttles, director of The Nest. If you remember a couple weeks ago, we had talked to the writer, so now we get to talk to the director, which is awesome. And it was cool talking to him about not only, movie directing, of course, his journey. He also has a film studio where they rent space to people for various projects, which is really cool. And I also got to talk to him about how it is to direct a story that was so personal to a writer and how he puts his own spin on it while maintaining what it's all about. So enjoy the interview. Hey everyone, Adam here, So Was Your Podcast. I'm sitting down with James Suttle to talk about his newest movie, The Nest. How you doing, James?
I'm doing great. How are you, Adam?
Doing good. Thanks for coming on. This should be fun.
Yeah. Looking forward to it.
The one boilerplate thing I do like to do is ask creative people what got you into the creative arts. What got you into directing, and kind of how did you get into it?
I was 14 years old and I was in theater class one day, just an elective that I took, and my teacher mentioned that there was a film shooting in the area, which was a Disney movie called Heavyweights. And so I decided, why not? I'll give it a try. So I ended up being an extra in Disney's Heavyweights when I think it was 13 or 14. And just seeing the collaborative nature of it and being impressionable at that age and saw what making a movie was like, pretty much I was hooked. And to be honest, I really haven't done much else since then. Even school projects back then in middle school and high school, I was still making films as my book reports. So I live and breathe it ever since. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
Oh, that's awesome. Whereabouts did you grow up?
I'm living Western North Carolina, so the mountains of North Carolina. It's a beautiful area, and films used to, and still to a certain extent, used to come here all the time to film, just because of the gorgeous nature of where we live.
That's always interesting because, someone says like, oh, I was born in LA and I grew up there. Like, to me, as someone not from LA, is like, oh, that makes sense. There's movies there, or even New York City, or like Toronto. But North Carolina is not a place I generally think of as like, oh, movies come here all the time. But I guess, scenery.
Yeah, it used to be, North Carolina used to be, I think, number three, if I remember right, back in the late '90s, early 2000s film production. Not
Oh,
so
wow.
much anymore. Yeah, Atlanta Georgia kind of took all the work that was coming here away. But no, North Carolina for a long time was a big contributor to the film scene.
Oh, that's very cool. Good to know. Interesting. And it's a funny, Heavyweights, because I remember watching that as a kid.
Yes, I didn't realize that it had somewhat became a cult classic, I think, to a particular generation. I think it was the one just right after mine. But yeah, I run into people all the time. They're always amazed because they're like, I used to watch that on the Disney Channel reruns all the time. So it's a good flick. It's fun.
Yeah, unless I'm going to get confused with something else, that was like really early Ben Stiller, too.
It was. It was early Ben Stiller. It was early Judd Apatow. That was actually, I think, the first movie he wrote and produced, and then the director Stephen Brill, who did Mighty Ducks. It was kind of early for all those guys. It's fun memory to kind of throw back to and think of as being sort of a launching pad for what I do.
Absolutely, yeah. So you have a role as an extra in Heavyweights, and were you at first saying I would like to be an actor, or was it always director, or was it just kind of I want to be involved?
It was one of those things. Like I said, I was 13, 14, and I got pulled out of school for, I think it was like 20 something, almost 30 days. And so to me, I'm sure that was part of the attraction. It was really just the scene, just the environment, right? So it's like you get to go play. I remember we did a food fight sequence, and so I got paid to be up all night throwing mustard and ketchup at people. So I think it was just the playfulness of it, sort of, still being a kid and thinking, oh wow, as I become an adult, I can still play and make a living, right? So I'm sure that was a big part of it. And over time, it developed. Then I started getting into wanting to create content and produce my own content, and then I started really falling in love with the photography side of it. So I really kind of went down a track of cinematography for the first 15 years of my career. And then in the past 5-6 years, I've really been putting a focus onto producing my own content and directing. So it's sort of an evolution. I think like with all creatives, it's a bit of an evolution of figuring out how to pay the bills doing what you love, and then ultimately getting where you want to be. So I think that's been my journey, just like so many others.
Yeah, the comment on paying the bills kind of touches up on what I wanted to ask next. Is when you said cinematographer the first 15, I was going to ask, did that come about as one, you were interested, so that's good, there's genuine interest, but also hey, this is more practical than just being like, you don't know me, I want to direct a big feature.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think. I mean, there's always that pursuit. You think you've got the great film to come out. You've got the great idea, right, to go make this film and direct. I'm a. I think I'm a bit more pragmatic, and I understand that that's hard to convince people to give you money because this is an art form that is not cheap.
Right.
So kind of coming into it with that, I kind of realized quickly that I had to find a way to pay the bills, but I also had to find a way to get that resume that supported the idea of yes, I can, successfully produce the content that I'm pitching to you, and it takes time, and it took me a lot of time to get to that point.
Directing feels, as an outsider saying this, directing feels like one of those jobs where it's like, oh, we'd love to give you a job. What's your experience? Oh, well, I don't have any. I need the job to get the experience. Oh, we'll come back when you have it. It's like, but how do I?
Right. The chicken and the egg, right? Yeah, it's a hard question because I get that question a lot. Like, how do you get into directing? How do you even get into DPing? Um, and it's like, if you're a cinematographer, there's a path there. You can start in the camera department and kind of work your way up. That's a very long process, and honestly, not how it usually is done. Usually, it's done by just taking a risk, getting a camera and shooting some great stuff, and then making the right connections and networking, and then getting that opportunity uh, to work with a director and producer that's doing something that hopefully has a budget. Directing is much the same way. It's about networking. I teach at a film school, and I tell my students all the time, you're coming here to learn the craft, but that's not really what you need to walk away with. You need to walk away with friendships and connections that helps your network because that ultimately is what's going to get you the job and get you the opportunities. You need to be able to deliver, so you need to know the craft. But really, if there's one thing you need to walk away with, it's the relationships.
That's I've heard that before. That does make a lot of sense because it's always, even in, I think in any industry, it's more about who you know than what you know. To an extent, obviously, you have to deliver once you get your foot in the door.
Yeah. You have to know the craft and you have to be able to deliver. But you're not going to get that opportunity to show what you can do if you don't network and don't build those relationships for sure.
Yeah, when you were talking about you just kind of have to pick up a camera, shoot some interesting stuff, and kind of prove yourself before you're proving yourself. Do you find that is a lot easier more recently, given the technology and the availability of it?
It is. I mean, I'm 40 years old, so I'm kind of at this weird place where the early part of my career, film is still, that's what you acquired on. And as I was like hitting my like 20, 21, suddenly digital video came out and was acceptable. So it wasn't great, but was acceptable. So there was that opportunity, like you're talking about. Now, yeah, I mean, it's you can go spend $1,000. I mean, honestly, the iPhone. I mean, it's got a great camera on it, so that you can get good quality imagery from just about anything inexpensively. But now, what's traded out for that? What was difficult to acquire is now there's such a quantity of content that it's hard to be able to get your content in front of people. So now we've traded the ability to acquire quality content for the ability to find an audience for that content. So it's easier to produce, yes, but man, is it even harder to get out in front of the right people.
I'm guessing that's a question you've been asked before because that was my follow up to it is creating that bigger pond.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there are always going to be obstacles in your way. Um, no matter if technology gives you better access, yes, it does, but it also presents its own problems. So you just got to be, you got to be nimble and fast on your feet and kind of figure out how do you find a solution to this issue. The issue that you have now is how do you get an audience, and that's something that I think all of filmmakers and creatives out there are trying to figure out. They're accessible, but you got to get it in front of them. And we don't have the millions of dollars to spend on marketing the way that studios do. So you have to be, you have to be creative. You have to get out there and pull and just put your stuff. That's the answer. Just don't be shy.
Right, you have to be your own best spokesperson.
You do. You do.
It's an interesting world where there's no excuse to not create something. It's hard to find that audience, like you're saying.
Yeah, and I would love for the world to work in a way where whatever story you want to tell is a story you should tell, and there's a lot of truth in that. But you also have to sit back and say, okay, can I find the audience for this story? Because ultimately, as much as I want to say that art is art and being creative is really the top priority, the truth is that if you create a film and you don't find an audience and you don't have an audience for it, your opportunities to create your second film are going to be minimized, right? And so yeah, it's all business. It's show business, right? It's all business. But you got to think of it from a 360-degree point of view and make sure that you're creating the right content, that there's an audience for, that you can access, so that gives you opportunities down the road to do another project.
That makes a lot of sense too. You can't just I mean, you do want to go out and make something, but it makes sense that what you make is now a reflection of what you can do, and your latest project is probably what's on anyone's minds who's considering you.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And hopefully, with a little luck, you have a little more success with the next project. Just like hopefully this project, we've had better success with the Nest than we have on the previous projects we've done. So it's always, hopefully we're always moving forward. That's the goal. And there's going to be setbacks, and the thing that sets us all apart is those that have the setbacks and stand up and keep pushing forward. But hopefully you find something new in every project as you move along that advances the direction you want to go, and your content is getting better and better, hopefully.
Absolutely. So, speaking of the Nest, how did that project come across your desk?
So I have a studio here in Asheville, North Carolina. We have a soundstage. My partner and I, we have a soundstage. We have a rental house, and we also have. I would kind of describe it like sort of like a creative co-working space in a sense, right? And so Jennifer Trudron, who's the writer of the film, she had been renting a cubicle from us as her writing spot for a couple of years, I believe, at that point. And I had just finished up a movie called The Good Things Devils Do that I had produced and DP'd. And I was looking for the next film that I wanted to do, that I wanted to direct. And I just asked her one day, I was like, hey, do you have any features, that you think I'd be interested in reading? And she gave me what was called The Bewelling then. We retitled it to The Nest. And I gave it a read and really fell in love with a lot of the themes and the metaphor that's sort of represented within the film of the monster, the creatures. And so we spent, I want to say it's about 6 or 8 months working together on developing it and rewriting the script. I mean, she did all the writing, obviously, but we collaborated on how the story would ultimately unfold. And then, just went out and made it.
It's cool. It's interesting because I actually talked to her last week, and it's such a personal story for her. She took, I mean, obviously not verbatim, but she took her personal life and her kids and a lot of her relationships, and there's a lot of that essence in the movie. So I was curious, as a director, how do you take something personal to something someone else wrote? Do you tap into it with your own personal connection, or do you feel what she's getting across, or how does that happen?
Yeah, I think with the Nest in particular, I have 4 kids. Jennifer has 2, so that sort of parental, I guess, bond exists in a way. And so for me, even though the story is very much a mother and daughter story, a lot of the same concepts and themes exist between fathers and daughters, fathers and sons. So really, for me, I tackled it with the idea of sort of this parental vision of what would happen in this situation, and also the difficulties that are presented with Meg in the story are ones that I've encountered with my own kids. Separation anxiety exists in all kids to a certain extent. There's always that moment of them, hiding behind your leg whenever there's strangers around, right? Or refusing to go into school on their first day of school. So that's just something that you deal with as a parent. So I think that's why I love The Nest as much as I do, is that I think it's a very accessible movie to anyone that's ever been a kid or had a kid, right? So that's pretty much everyone, right? And so for me, even though the original draft of the script was very personal for her, and the resources that she pulled from, the experiences she pulled from, I think those are universal truths that exist. And so that was really, for me, as we went into the rewriting process, and there's a whole story there of her original script had 2 timelines, and we took that down to 1, and we really kind of streamlined a lot of what the screenplay was doing. As we did that, I was finding ways to sort of inject ideas and concepts that were a part of me too. And so by the end, by the time we go into production, to me, the film is just as personal, I think, at least from my perspective, as the screenplay was to her. And I think that's something that I think is very special about this movie for me. Is this is very much a movie that is the type of movie I would like to see, but it's also a movie that I can identify with personally, and I think a lot of others can too.
Yeah, the identifying part is something that I always appreciate when horror movies go for it. Horror for the sake of horror, for me personally, isn't what I'm usually after. But when horror is a metaphor for something deeper and like real world, real human emotions, I think it works so much better. So it's cool that you got both parenting perspectives on it.
Yeah, and I think, and that's the thing for me that the Nest is it was really important is I wanted to make a movie that wasn't just a creature film. It wasn't there for the gore. I've done those. Those are fun. They're fun to shoot, and they can be fun to watch. But that's not my type of film. I love movies that there's a lot more layers to the onion to peel back, and that's the Nest. I mean, there's so many things in this film that if you really investigate it and you look at the characters, you look at their motivations, you see how the creatures are controlling and manipulating the situation. But really, this film, if you took the bugs out of the movie, you would still have a very strong drama that was about family, destruction essentially. So I think that to me is the thing that works really well about the film is that it's a horror film, yes, and it's got the creatures and it's got sort of the body snatcher element to it, right? And the body horror aspect of it to a certain extent. But as a story in and of itself, it works even without that. So to me, that's the strength of Jennifer's writing, and I think the strength of what all of the people that collaborated with me on the film did.
And I think when it comes to science fiction or supernatural, or sorry, 1 second. They know when I press record. She's sleeping. Then sorry about that. I think that's what works best with anything science fiction, supernatural, monster, whatever it is, horror. When you have that core strong drama first, no matter how ridiculous it gets, the audience is on board because they're already invested in the characters. You can sell them on anything else.
Yeah. I mean, it's horror. Good horror taps into the fears that I think already exist within the audience, right? So you're introducing new ideas and new representations of it, right? New metaphors of the horror genre, but the audience has to tap into something within themselves to identify with the story and the characters, and I think, and that's again the thing with the Nest that I absolutely adore with what we did, which is the parents, Sarah playing Beth and Maple with Meg as the little girl and Patrick with playing the dad, they feel like a true family unit, right? They're not simple, they're not very clean, they're not just happy go lucky, middle America family and suddenly something bad happens. They've got each one of them have their own struggles and their own character deficits, right? Which everyone does. We're not perfect. There's no perfect person, no perfect family. I think what I'm very happy about is that I think that we really created a family that felt true and real. And then from that audience can tap into those fears that they have relating back to all of those same concepts. And then they can go on the journey with us and it feels real. The scary is truly scary when it's something from inside you.
Yeah, that's a great line. The family unit thing too, now that you're mentioning, is super important because if it was everything is perfect family, then things start to go wrong. You're not really as invested because it's not real.
Yeah.
It makes the contrast, a bigger divide, but the
Yeah.
audience is just kind of, you're along for the ride, sure, but you're not invested.
Right. And I think that that's the big difference between what I consider true independent filmmaking versus just B movie cash grab filmmaking, right? We could totally go out and make a film about bugs that eat people and control people and just have blood spewing and have crazy things happening. And of course, the characters would be very one dimensional. It would be the happy, perfect middle America, Ohio family. And suddenly bugs come and kill the daughter and take over. And now we're just going to chase each other around with knives, right? That would be very simple, would please a segment of the audience, absolutely. But that's not the kind of movie I want to make, and that's not the kind of movie that I hope people that like this film like to see.
Yeah, I think you're definitely on to something there. As far as your other movies, past movies have you done horror like this before? Horror kind of with heart?
No, I mean it's I mean, horror. I love horror as a genre because it's a genre that allows you to explore things like what we're talking about here within it, and you're not kind of confined by um, rules that exist, right? Like you do with other genres. So that's one of the reasons I've really kind of dropped into the horror zone for the past 4 or 5 years. Um, I did another movie called The Evil Inside Her, which was it was really a proof of concept film for me, which was, can I do these films on these budget levels that I'm working on? And so it was as much that as it was me telling a story I really wanted to tell. Um, it's a very that movie is a very simple cabin in the woods. There's bad things happening, and one by one, everyone's going to die. And so that one definitely didn't have the heart, but it was more about, can I produce these at these budgets, and let's go have fun making a movie that hopefully the audience likes. And then I produced and DP'd a movie called The Good Things Devils Do, which is very much a gore fest, vampires, blood, goo, stakes in the heart, people with knives taped to their hands, and that's just a rock and roll. Let's go have a great time and just be absurd, right? And so that's a fun movie to make. And as a director of photography, it's great to light because we played with crazy colors, and so that's as much about the art of for me was as much about the art of the cinematography as it was the story. But it didn't have heart. There's definitely not heart there. That's a film for pure entertainment. Um, I had done another film which we actually haven't released yet. We're going down the festival circuit with it, called 7 Days Till Midnight, and it's very much a guy in the woods talking with a friend, and there's a little sci-fi element. It's very much a drama, and it's about relationships and people and the problems that we have inside of ourselves as you come to be middle-aged and realize you're not everything you dreamed you would be, right? So that's very much not a genre of film, and it's very much a very small segment of the audience I'm sure will enjoy it. But that's the kind of movies I love to watch. That's the kind of movies I love to make. The Nest is sort of a blend of all of that. It's what I hope is something the audience really enjoys the journey of, but also has a little bit of the horror elements in there to kind of keep them entertained at the same time. So it's a blend for me.
That makes a lot of sense. It was a cool way to bring it all together too. Kind of taking your past experiences and
Yeah, I mean it's always trying to find ways to. It goes back to one of the first questions that you asked. It goes back to making sure that we're making projects the audience goes and sees, rents, picks up, whatever, so that we can make the next one, right? But there's always, every filmmaker has that story about a guy and a girl sitting in a room, right, talking, because there's this great story, this relationship to tell. But who's going to watch that? It's a very limited audience. So you got to find creative ways to tell that same story within a genre or within a plot that's attractive to the audience.
absolutely. Yeah, it's almost like you have to write the movie drama, the people sitting talking, the feelings, and then you have to write the hook over it.
Yeah, and I'm sure that maybe is how Jennifer came to the creative side of the Nest with the screenplay, because there were things happening with her children that she wanted to kind of write about. Those are real life issues, and then like how do you craft that into a story that just is eerie and attractive to an audience? And that's what she did. She found a beautiful way to kind of craft that and blend the two worlds. Um, yeah. I mean, it's you don't get invested into films like this. You spend 2 years making a movie. You have to love what you're doing, and you also have to want to tell the story. Um, and I think that everybody involved in this movie really felt that this was something special in the beginning, and it all started with her screenplay, and the reality that this was tied to something important that parents deal with all the time.
Yeah, that also makes a lot of sense because not only is it the money investment, but the time investment.
Yeah,
2 years to make a movie it seems probably normal, but when you say 2 years on one project, it sounds like a lot at the same time.
yeah. I mean, it's no, there's no way that you can't look at it and say, it's a 2 year commitment, because there's a development time in the screenplay. There's the production time, which is the shortest period of all of it. This film we did in 3 weeks, I believe it was. Post production, that's a big chunk of the time. That's 9, 10 months between the editorial and the sound design and the music and the visual effects. And then you've got the period after that where you're into the sales and distribution side, where you're trying to find that partner, and you're working with sales agents and producers reps trying to find the right place to place it and get it out there. And then, we sold the movie, I think, I believe it was November or December of 2020. Um, then there's that whole process of like building the marketing and figuring out how are you going to get this out there? What platforms is it going to? How do you find the audience? Well, that's another 6, 7 months. And so here we are in July, 2021, releasing the film. And we were in production shooting in February, March of 2020. And I want to say we started working on the screenplay in May of 2019. So, and then there's 2 years before that Jennifer had written the script. So
Yeah.
for perception, this thing's got a 4-year life cycle.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's crazy, but at the same time, breaking down any individual part doesn't feel like enough time.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's funny because we're working on putting together another project that we're doing, and we're looking at a substantially larger budget than we had for this, and we're looking at 25 days of shooting versus the 15 that we had on this. And one of the producers on the project and I were sitting here just a minute ago, and we're like, we don't have enough time and enough money. And it's like, wait, we have 9 times the amount of money we had in the last one. We have 10 more days, almost 50% more days, and we don't have enough time. Why is that? And yeah, it's all perception. The world's ruled by perception, and so is filmmaking. So
Yeah, filmmaking probably even more so. It's a bottled version.
yeah, you present these ideas to someone that's doing, a Marvel film, for example, and they're like, what? We need 80 days to shoot this. We need 120 days to shoot this.
Yeah, they're taking 25 days on a fight sequence.
Right. And it's like, that's not the world I work in. The biggest film I've ever done, I think we shot for 45 days. And that was great. You kind of count out how much your workload is based upon how many pages a day you're shooting on a film. And on the Nest, we're probably shooting 5, 6, 7 pages a day. And on that movie, we were shooting 2 pages on average a day. We still felt like we were rushed. So it's all perception.
Yeah, I mean, 5 pages a day. It's from everything that I've gathered, because I'm very interested in the process. That's a lot.
It is. I mean, I think the studio average is like 2.5. Bigger, the Marvel action films. Yeah, you can. There can be an action sequence you spend 10, 20 days on, and it's a 5-minute sequence. Just depends. It's all relative, I guess. If it's dialogue heavy, 5 pages I don't think is difficult. You start getting to the 7 pages a day, and you start sweating it. So
the actors start sweating it.
Yeah, for sure.
So you started in cinematography, and you mentioned you were the DP on another movie that you also directed. Did you also shoot this one?
I did not, no. So Greg Hudgens, who's my partner at the studio and the rental house that we own, I've known him for 20 plus years. He's a good friend, and when I'm DPing, he's been working as my gaffer a lot. And so going into directing a film, it's just a little too much to direct a DP. There's just your workload is being spread too thin. Because you're dealing with 2 different sides of the brain, and you're dealing with multiple people that aren't related between the 2 positions. So anyway, I love having him shoot the film for me. I think he did just an outstanding job with this film. I love what he crafted. And then on The Evil Inside Her that I produced and directed, he also DP'd that. So we just kind of jump back and forth. I mean, we're all a team. This is the running gag with all the interviews we've been doing is that this is very much a family affair in a way. Everyone that works on this, for the most part, the majority of us have worked on multiple films together over the years. And so when we get together to do we don't have a ton of money, so we're doing it out of the passion, the love of what we do. But we just enjoy working together, and we enjoy what we create together. And so that's very much how all these projects come together. And so back to your question, Greg is one of my closest collaborators, and hopefully will be for decades more.
That's awesome. Well, James, I don't want to eat up your whole afternoon, but I appreciate you taking the time to come on. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find The Nest?
Yeah, so The Nest is out. It came out July 20th. It's available Redbox DVD. It's available on Redbox On Demand, Apple TV, Vudu. It's available on all your cable, satellite networks, DirecTV, Dish, Comcast, etc. pretty much you can get it anywhere you want. If you want to buy a copy, you can go to the store at Walmart, buy a copy there. You can get it on Amazon. If it sells a DVD, or if they stream video, it's probably available for rental or purchase. Yeah, so it's out there. It's out there, and just waiting for you to see it. So check it out.
Awesome. And if you want to tell everybody about maybe your studio or your socials or anything like that, anything else you want to plug?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you're interested in learning more about me, check out just Google Subtle Film, SUTTLEFILM.com is my website. Or if you just Google Subtle Film, pretty much I'll pop up. And then if you're in the Asheville, West North Carolina area, check out the Asheville Studio and Asheville Camera Grip and Lighting. That's all us. So a lot of hats that we wear, and but we love what we do. So check it out.
That's awesome, James. Well, congratulations on the movie, and thanks again for taking the time to come on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Adam. Been a pleasure.
Definitely. I'd like to thank James one more time for coming on to talk to me about The Nest, his career, everything involved. The Nest is available now on VOD, so make sure you check it out. Make sure you like and subscribe. We have a lot more stuff coming your way, a lot more new movie coverage, Cat, a lot more interviews, unboxings, all the above. Also, make sure you listen to So Wizard Podcast every single week, wherever you get your podcasts. So Wizard Podcast can also be found on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you get multiple monthly bonus shows. SoWizardPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, merchandise, videos, and more. We love hearing feedback, so drop us a note in the comments, leave us something on social media. All accounts can be found after the show and in the show notes. And on a more personal note, a good friend and I have an ongoing comedy comic series. The first chapter just wrapped up, and here's a cool teaser video to kind of let you know what it's all about.